And welcome back to EDH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and this is Brewing with Underwhelming Commanders, episode 13. And we are starting out this week with Solkanar the Swamp King, 2 blue, black, and a red, demon, 5/5, has Swamp Walk, and whenever a player casts a black spell, you gain 1 life. Very interesting combination of abilities there. I mean, first of all, it's a demon, so that's interesting. You probably could go a little bit of a demon tribal with this, I think, if you wanted to. Grixis Demons is interesting. That's probably something that doesn't get done very often. You always want to be looking at your commander's creature type whenever you're brewing with Underwhelming Commanders. Those are 2 very usable abilities, though. Swamp Walk is definitely usable. Obviously, it can't be blocked if your opponent controls a swamp, and whenever a player, any player, casts a black spell, you gain 1 life. So right out of the gate for me, I want to throw Painter's Servant in this deck. When it enters the battlefield, you choose a color, so we're going to choose black. And all spells are going to be black now, so anytime anyone casts a spell, we're gaining a life. That's pretty darn good. You know, I always say that life gain is very underrated in Commander. And now we can even do a little bit of life gain theme, right? We can throw in Witch of the Moors, 3 black, black, Human Warlock, 4/4 with Death Touch at the beginning of your end step. If you gained life this turn, each opponent sacrifices a creature and you return up to 1 target creature from your graveyard to your hand. I think this is an auto-include in a Solkanar deck. All you have to do is just cast a black spell on your turn. Even if we don't have the Painter's Servant, you yourself casting a black spell on your turn is going to gain you that 1 life, and that's going to trigger this. This is fantastic in a Solkanar deck. Essence Pulse is a newer one that I think will work. 3 and a black sorcery, you gain 2 life. Each creature gets -X/-X until end turn, where X is the amount of life you gain this turn. So this is a black spell. So if I cast this, I'm going to gain 2 life and I'm going to gain a life off of my Solkanar. That's a minimum of 3. So now I'm giving all creatures -3/-3 until end of turn. If I manage to cast another black spell, we're up to -4/-4, so that's a great fit in the deck. And Tivash, Gloom Summoner, I mean, why not, right? Again, even if we only gain the 1 life at the beginning of our end step, we pay the 1 life and we get a 1/1 black demon creature token with flying. Also fits the demon theme if you want to go more that way, but just getting that free 1/1 demon flyer every single turn on our end step I think is pretty darn good. If we can manage to gain more life than that, then we'll get some bigger ones. And of course, Will of Lost Dreams is every time someone casts a black spell, now we can just pay 1 and draw a card. That's going to be fantastic in the deck as well. So building around that life gain ability I think is definitely doable. Building around the Swamp Walk ability is also going to be really important. And of course, the most important card for that is going to be Urborg. You probably put Urborg in this deck anyway, because each land is going to now be a swamp, and it's going to make our commander unblockable, and you could go more of a Voltron strategy with this as well. I mean, that would be the win con if I'm building this deck. The life gain thing is just an added bonus, right? I get all those added bonuses that I just talked about on top of the fact that my life is going up instead of down, which is always what you want in any game. But the win con here, I think, probably is going to be more of a Voltron strategy. I attack with my unblockable commander, and of course, Urborg is going to make that really easy. Other ways you can do it, Blanket of Night. 1 black, black enchantment. Each land is a swamp in addition to its other land type, so that's going to make our commander unblockable. And if you really want to go deep, Cyclopean Tomb, 4 mana artifact, and you can pay 2 and tap to put a Mire counter on target non-swamp land. That land is a swamp for as long as it has a Mire counter on it, activate only during your upkeep. So that's another way to ensure that your opponent has a swamp if you're relying heavily on that strategy. And of course, we are in black, so getting any of these cards that you really, really need badly isn't going to be that difficult because black has so many great tutors. And since we are almost guaranteed going to be making our opponent's lands swamps, another little trick you could throw in this deck is Cormus Bell. All swamps are 1/1 black creatures. They're still lands. So, you know, you could do some shenanigans here where you have any sort of effect that's going to give your opponent's creatures a -1/-1 until end of turn, and it's going to wipe out all your opponent's lands. This is the not so nice version of this deck, I suppose. You could even throw in a creature like Profaner of the Dead. 3 and a blue, Naga Wizard, 3/3, has exploit, and whenever Profaner the Dead exploits a creature, return to owner's hand all creatures your opponents control with toughness less than the exploited creature's toughness. So you just have to exploit a creature with toughness 2. Profaner of the Dead can exploit itself, so you can just basically pay 4 mana and bounce all your opponent's lands to hand if you have Cormus Bell and, say, Urborg or Blanket of Night in play. Just a neat little trick that you can do in a deck where you're already doing that stuff already, right? You're already going to have those effects that are making your opponent's lands into swamps, so maybe just throw that in there as well, sort of as a win con, or I guess an insurance for win con. Destroying all your opponent's lands isn't necessarily a win con. It's just going to make it a heck of a lot easier for you to close out the game, right? So that is Solkanar. Very interesting. Like I said, the Swamp Walk and the Life Gain are sort of a weird combination where I'm probably going to go a little bit of a Voltron strategy here. That's how I'm going to win with this. If we can even boost our commander's power by 2, which isn't that difficult. Now we're in the 3 hits and you're dead scenario with commander damage. And then let's just take a bunch of advantage out of that life gain as well. Very interesting build round, I think. But coming in at number 2 this week is Hakim Loreweaver. 3 blue, human wizard 2/4. Has flying and has a couple of really interesting abilities here, okay? So, pay blue and a blue, return target or a card from your graveyard to the battlefield attached to Hakim Loreweaver. Activate only during your upkeep and only if Hakim Loreweaver isn't enchanted, okay? So, this ability, there's no tap or anything here. You can do it as much as you want. However, you can only activate this ability during your upkeep, and you can only do it if he already doesn't have auras attached to him. Now, of course, the trick here, and there's a couple of tricks here, is you can activate this ability multiple times in response, right? The ability is only going to check when you activate it if Hakim has an aura on him already. So during your upkeep, you can pay 2 blue to return an aura from your graveyard and put it on your Hakim, and then respond to your own ability by doing it again. And he hasn't been enchanted yet because that ability hasn't resolved, so you can do it more than once, right? You can do it twice, you can do it even 3 times, however much mana you want to spend during your upkeep, and load up a bunch of enchantments on your Hakim if you want to. He also, however, has the ability where you can pay 2 blue and tap to destroy all auras attached to Hakim, which is a very interesting ability. Obviously, you can use that in a couple of different ways, where now if my opponent throws a pacifism, for example, on my commander, I can destroy it and get rid of it. That's probably not going to happen very likely, though. More so, what you're going to do is you have an aura on your Hakim and you want a different aura on him that's in your graveyard. You can't activate the ability because he's already enchanted, so you destroy the one that's on him so that you can put a different one on him, right? The other thing of note here is only his ability you can use if he's enchanted, right? You can still obviously put auras on him. So what you're going to want to do is, I think you're going to want to put an aura from your graveyard into play on him, and then if you have one in your hand, you can cast that one normally and put it on him, right? So we're in a mono blue aura deck, which is obviously what makes Hakim a bit of an underwhelming commander, clearly, but there are some cards that are going to help. Rain, Academy Chancellor, is a great one. This is a personal favorite of mine. I just talked about this in my commanders that I think are better in the 99 video, and this is definitely one of those decks. A mono blue deck where we're caring about auras. 2 and a blue human wizard 1/1. Whenever you or a permanent you control becomes the target of a spell or an ability opponent controls, you may draw a card. That's fantastic. This is our creatures, our lands, anything, right? If our opponent wastelands one of our lands, we get to draw a card because that is a permanent we control becoming the target of a spell or an ability opponent controls. But on top of that, you may draw an additional card if Rain is enchanted. So we're in an enchantment deck. The chances that we can just chuck one of our auras on Rain is going to be very likely. So now anything of ours that gets targeted, we're going to get to draw 2 cards. Going to be a fantastic inclusion in the deck. Rootwater Matriarch and Rootwater Shaman are also going to be fantastic includes. Rootwater Shaman just allows us to cast all those aura spells with flash. That's always going to be good. And Rootwater Matriarch, tap to gain control of target creature for as long as that creature is enchanted. Also fantastic. So now we can chuck any of our auras on our opponent's creatures and then immediately gain control of them. Great includes in the deck. Also, Thran Golem is going to be a great include in the deck. It's a creature that wants to be enchanted, right? 5 mana Golem, 3/3. As long as Thran Golem is enchanted, it gets +2/+2 and has flying, first strike, and trample. So it's going to be a 5/5 flying, first strike, trample. And then on top of that, whatever else the aura is going to imbue. And of course, we're just going to put a ton of auras in this deck. You're just going to put your favorites. Octopus Umbra is going to be a great one. Eldrazi Conscription is going to be obviously obviously the best one that you're going to want to put in this deck. We're going to be cheating them into play, don't forget, right? Our commander's ability will allow us to cheat these into play if they're in the graveyard. So we're going to want to put them in the graveyard. You're going to want lots of looting effects in this deck. So I chuck my Eldrazi Conscription in the graveyard with a looting effect. Then all I have to do is pay 2 mana on my upkeep, and it goes on my Hakim, who is now a 12/14 with flying and Annihilator 2. That's going to close out the game pretty quick, right? Academy Researchers is going to be another great way that we can cheat some of these more expensive auras. When it enters the battlefield, you may put an aura card from your hand onto the battlefield attached to it. And don't forget, if we put the Eldrazi Conscription attached to our Academy Researchers, I mean, that's great. We have a 12/12 with Annihilator 2. And if it dies, which it likely will, Eldrazi Conscription goes to the graveyard, and then we can put it on our Hakim after, right? This is what makes Hakim actually pretty good for an aura deck, right? You lose the value. That's the bad thing about auras, where someone kills my Academy Researchers or even exiles my Academy Researchers. The Eldrazi Conscription isn't going to get exiled. It's going to go to the graveyard. So now we get to use it again for our commander. And of course, Arcana Wings has the entirely unique ability of Aura Swap, which I mentioned in my abilities that I want to see Wizards of the Coast revisit video. Enchanted creature has flying. I mean, that's definitely a usable ability, but more importantly, we can pay 2 and a blue and exchange this aura with an aura in our hand. That's going to be fantastic. And again, we can get into a situation where if this is in our graveyard, we can put it on our Hakim with his ability. Then we can pay the 3 and swap it out with something even better in our hand. Just a lot of ways we can use this card in the deck. Because we're doing an aura theme in mono blue, we also want to put lots of stuff like Deep Freeze and Imprisoned in the Moon in here. Why not? We're already in an aura theme. Might as well put some in here that we can lock down our opponent's stuff with. Aura Graft and Crown of Ages are also going to be really fantastic here. Aura Graft, 1 and a blue instant, gain control of target aura that's attached to a permanent for the rest of the game. Attach it to another permanent. It can enchant. And Crown of the Ages, you can pay 4 and attach target aura attached to a creature to another creature. And you really could go this theme with the deck. This is a really interesting theme you could go with the deck. I have my Hakim. Imprisoned in the Moon is in my graveyard. I can actually use Hakim's ability to return Imprisoned to the Moon to play attached to Hakim. Then I use my Aura Graft and swap it onto another creature. Crown of Ages can really be a powerhouse in this deck for that reason, and you could throw maybe even a Tribute Mage in here to go get it if you want to, where I can just keep returning those lockdown imprison effects onto my Hakim and then swap it onto one of my opponent's creatures, whichever is threatening me. Enchantment Alteration is going to be another way you can do this. 1 mana blue instant, attach target aura attached to a creature or land to another permanent of that type. So again, you can do the same thing that way, or just swap it among creatures you control even. Hookah's Mischief, I think, is an interesting one. You know, if you go the route of I'm playing more of those prison type effects, you can now swap it, right? At the beginning of your upkeep, you may exchange control of target non-land permanent you control and target non-land permanent an opponent controls with an equal or lesser mana value. So any of those, you know, Imprison in the Moon, Deep Freeze type of effects, we put it on our opponent's creatures. Once it's on that creature, whoever controls it is not going to matter, right? It's still going to stick there. So if we exchange control, now our opponent controls it and we gain control of something of theirs, right? Because we're exchanging control, and we're just going to use Puka's Mistress to gain control of one of their permanents. So I think that's an interesting inclusion in the deck as well. Again, cards like Abduction and False Demise, which I've mentioned both in my 10 cards videos, are going to be great, where we can use these to steal our opponent's creatures. So we can do the swapping thing here, or we can just use it to protect our commander. You know, we have False Demise in our graveyard. We can pay 2 blue, stick it on our commander, and now it's not going to be so easy for them to kill it, because when it dies, it comes back into play under our control. Illusory Gains is definitely a perfect fit in this deck. 3 blue aura enchant creature. You control enchanted creature. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under opponent's control, attach Illusory Gains to that creature. This is a real fun one in the deck, because of course, again, we can return this from our graveyard to play attached to Hakim. We already control him, so it's not going to do anything, but as soon as our opponents play a creature, it's going to attach to that creature, and now we gain control of it. So that's a really interesting one. Really, again, a very underwhelming commander, no question. But as soon as I started spitballing with all these ideas, I really came up with a lot. I think there's a ton that you can do here for sure. But coming in at number 1 this week And again, a little bit of a surprise. I just never know with these polls. Honestly, if I was to bet money on who was going to win these polls, there would just be no way. There would be no way for me to figure it out. There's no pattern here. There's no theme. This week, it's Konda, Lord of Eiganjo. And, why is this the winner? I don't know. Is it a combination of people who want to see me build this deck because they don't know what to do with it and they want to play it? Or is it people who are just saying, this is such a bad commander, let's see what he does with it? I don't know. I've definitely had a lot of mono white commanders win these polls now. I think mono white commanders have won more of these polls than any other color. So maybe that has something to do with it. And I guess a lot of my regular viewers know I like white, particularly good at making mono white decks. I've made a lot. So maybe that comes into the equation. I don't know. Nevertheless, here we are. Konda is the winner this time. 5 white human samurai, 3/3. Has vigilance and has indestructible. And of course, that's huge. That's the most important part here. Having a commander with indestructible, obviously you're going to want to build around that ability. Also has Bushido 5. Whenever this creature blocks or becomes blocked, it gets +5/+5 until end of turn. So that's really huge. So it's going to become an 8/8 whenever it blocks or becomes blocked. There's definitely some stuff to build around here. The first issue, though, we have to tackle is our commander costs 7. That's a lot. I don't love having a commander that costs 7. So we got to get that commander in play. The upside is here, our commander has indestructible. So once we get it in play, yes, it can leave play, but we don't have to worry about it nearly as much. So I'm going to throw a lot of cards in this deck that I normally don't play, like Crystal Vein. It's a land that taps for colorless mana, but you can also sacrifice it to add 2 colorless mana. So it's a ritual effect, right? And that works good in a deck like this where I just want to get my commander out faster. I'm down a land, but my commander is one of the most expensive things in my entire deck, so that's not usually an issue, right? Extra planar lens is going to be another good one. This is a card I've never put in a deck ever, but in this deck I think it's going to be necessary because our commander costs so much. And Geode Golem is another one that really doesn't see hardly any play at all. I think it's great if you have an expensive commander, right? 5 mana 5/3 with trample. Golem, artifact creature, has trample, and whenever Geode Golem deals combat damage to a player, you may cast your commander from the command zone without paying its mana cost. So that's definitely going to get around it, especially if our commander does end up back in the command zone at some point. It's really going to be helpful. Really, though, the indestructible is the ability that we want to build around most here, and the best way to do that is just by destroying everything, right? There's lots of ways to do that in white. Devastating Mastery, Hour of Revelation. I mean, you can go really deep here on the board wipes. I usually put 4 or 5 board wipes in my mono white decks. I would put more in this deck because we're gaining more advantage from it, right? We're gaining more advantage from having more board wipes because our commander is going to stay alive. Doomscar even put in this deck. Planar Collapse is a great one. 1 and a white enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, if there are 4 or more creatures on the battlefield, you sacrifice it and destroy all creatures. They can't be regenerated. So we're definitely going deep here. And of course, we're going to put Vanquish the Horde from the new set in here as well. 8 mana, but it costs 1 less to cast for each creature on the battlefield. And as I talked about in my top cards from Innistrad Midnight Hunt, likely it's going to cost just white and a white whenever you cast this, and it's going to destroy all creatures. So that's going to be great in the deck. We don't want to just be destroying all of our creatures all the time. So Cosmic Intervention and Faith's Reward, because we do have a lot of these board wipes, and also the board wipes like Hour of Revelation that are destroying all the permanents, we want to be able to get some of our stuff back. So cards like this are going to be fantastic in the deck where we can slingshot all of our stuff back into play. This is ultimately, though, I think going to be a Voltron deck, and I really think we want to be forcing our opponents to block. So Magnetic Web is a card that I mentioned in my 10 cards video a long time ago, and Konda is one of the commanders that I mentioned that I thought it would be a great fit with for a couple of reasons. One, because we kind of want to force blocks here, right? This just becomes a removal effect where now I put a magnetic counter on my commander, and because he's indestructible, he likely won't be leaving the battlefield very often. So that magnetic counter is going to stay there, and then from there on in, every single turn when I attack, if my opponent has a troublesome creature that has a toughness 8 or less, now I can put a magnet counter on that creature, force it to block, and it's just going to die to my Konda because my Konda becomes an 8/8. Don't have to worry about my Konda dying in combat, obviously. Nemesis Mask is another way that we can force blocks. I think forcing blocks is going to be important, but also I think we're going to want trample, right? Just forcing a block to kill a creature is good, but forcing a block to kill a creature and then trample over for more damage is going to be important. We want lots of those effects like Chariot of Victory and Sword of Vengeance. Trample is just going to be a great combination with that Bushido. If we can force a block on top of the fact that we're giving our commander trample, it's really going to make it difficult for our opponents because now they force the block, our Commander becomes an 8/8. We're going to kill that creature that's blocking it, and then it's going to also trample over for damage. And I'll just say right now, I played a game with this, a test game, and I had O Naginata on my commander and Grappling Hook. So O Naginata is a 1-mana equipment, can only be attached to a creature with 3 or more power. Okay, that's great. That's our commander. He has 3 power. Equipped creature gets +3/+0 and has trample. And has equip too. So our commander is automatically going to be a 6/3. And I had a grappling hook on it, which is also just an absolute perfect fit in this deck. Equipped creature has double strike, and when it attacks, you may have target creature block it this turn if able. It's one of the best cards in the deck for sure. And of course, we're going to have a ton of effects in this deck that are searching for equipment. One of the other things that white does best, I attacked with my commander, forced my opponent's creature to block, and it was a 2/2, okay? So let's just do the math here. My opponent blocks with their 2/2 creature. My commander's already a 6/3 because the O Naginata and has trample, gets blocked, so it gets the Bushido 5, the +5/+5, becomes an 11/8 with double strike. So my commander's now an 11/8 double strike, kills the creature blocking it obviously easily, does 2 damage, and because it has trample, it's going to trample over the first strike damage, right? So now my opponent's going to take 9 damage, and then the double strike damage comes in, and again, got trample, so all of that 11 damage goes over. So a total of 20 damage I did to my opponent. Obviously, if they would have blocked with a 1/1, they would have just been straight up dead. So that's how easy it is. Yes, we have a commander that's really expensive, and there is a little bit of setup here that needs to be done, but you can easily one-shot your opponent with a situation like that. Of course, we have lots of ways, like you typically would in equipment decks like Pure Steel Paladin and Ardennes, where we're cheating equip costs. You know, we are going to have other creatures in this deck that we can equip with all of these as well. We're not just going to rely on our commander. Halvar, God of Battle, is going to be great because it's going to give our commander double strike if he's equipped. SRAM, obviously, you know, all of those cards that you typically would put in a equipment deck, I threw in here. If you want the win con, here it is. It's World Slayer. You know, this is a Voltron deck. The win con here is we kill our opponents. I guess I have 3 Voltron decks in this Underwhelming Commanders episode. I didn't even think of that before, but yeah, I guess all 3 of the decks in this episode are technically Voltron Commanders. This one certainly is, and World Slayer is going to be definitely a way we can close out the game a lot quicker because we can throw this on our commander, and when we connect, it's going to destroy all permanents other than World Slayer. And of course, our commander's indestructible, so he's not going anywhere. So everything's going to get destroyed except for our commander and the World Slayer. And of course, we can just keep doing this, right? We can just keep doing this over and over and over again. Our opponents will never be able to keep anything in play. It's going to be pretty difficult for us to lose the game if that be the case. If you don't like the land destruction part of this, then you can take this out of the deck, obviously, if you want to. But it's definitely, you know, we have a commander that's expensive, but it's indestructible, so why not take advantage of that, right? A couple other things we're doing in this deck. Takino, Samurai General, 5, and a white human samurai, 3/3. Has Bushido 2, and each other samurai you control gets +1/+1 for each point of Bushido it has. Wowzers. So now our Konda is just straight up an 8/8 all the time. That's incredible. And the Bushido doesn't go away. So now our commander is an 8/8, and when it gets blocked, it still gets the +5/+5. So now it's a 13/13 when it comes blocked. That's going to be fantastic. And then I just threw Zetalpa Primal Dawn in this deck. You know, it's an indestructible creature. I thought having a couple other indestructible creatures would be great. You really could almost swap out commanders here. This deck, I think, with just a couple minor changes could easily be a Zetalpa deck because, you know, we're building around that indestructible, maybe a little bit more in a Zetalpa deck than we would in this deck. You know, for me, I sort of went with the Bushido a little bit here where I want our commander to get blocked. In a Zetalpa deck, because it has flying, it's not going to be blocked that often, but very similar. You know, if there's anyone watching this video that wants to make a Zetalpa deck, you definitely could take this shell, make a few changes, but keep basically most of the other stuff, and I think you definitely could. It definitely is a great fit in this deck, though, as well, because, again, we're going to be doing those board wipes all the time. It's going to be great to have a couple more indestructible creatures in this deck as well. But that is my Konda Lord of Eiganjo deck. It's an interesting one, no question. And the deck list for this one is in the description below. Check it out. Give it a run if you want. Play with it. See if you like it. The poll for the next Underwhelming Commanders episode is in the description as well. Make sure you go vote and leave a comment. You know, I've sort of caught up with all of the suggestions that I've had for people wanting to see them in the polls. So make sure you leave a comment below the commanders that you want to see in the next poll. So I can add them to the next poll, and maybe the commander you want to see will win, and you'll get to a deck list or at least a rundown of what I think you should do with that commander. And if you like my deck building prowess, you can definitely also check out my Patreon. I do all my patron deck decks there. I also do all my deck doctors on my Patreon as well. So if you need some help with your decks, I'm always on there giving lots of help to my patrons on their own personal decks and building decks for them as well. So check it out. But that is it for today, and thanks for tuning in.